Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. That's my guy.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. This is not the YouTube podcast. We have a normal live stream tonight. As far as I know, I'm not in the void. Tyler's not in the void. So hopefully our live audience can see us and hear us just okay. But tonight we'll be diving into some defensive free agent targets for the Chargers. We've talked a lot about offensive guys over the last few weeks, given like the Dolphins connections. And, you know, I think generally speaking, that's where we figure the Chargers will spend the bulk of their external money. But tonight we'll talk about 20-ish Chargers defensive free agent targets and some former Ravens, some other connections here, but some other fun players too. And we'll talk about kind of general philosophy as we get going here, you know, as we dive into free agency, which is, I think, 3 weeks away. So right around the corner here. It will be here in no time. Joining me, as always, to do that is my good friend Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Doing very well. We're kind of in the no man's land of the offseason. It's not quite, you know, it's been the Senior Bowl already. We're waiting for the combine. We're waiting for free agency. So why not discuss defensive free agents? I think if you are clicking on this live stream, whether during the live stream or after the live stream, you're all in. Like, the offseason is a thing for you. Otherwise, you know, it's all good. You don't have to watch us. Totally fine. But this is like into the weeds stuff, because I don't think even you and I expect them to spend a ton of money on external free agents, but we have 25 names, if I'm not mistaken, on here just in case they want to.
Yeah, I think we kind of expect them to, you know, be a little frugal and maybe spend on one big external free agent. I think obviously everybody kind of expects that to be offensive line. But hypothetically, there is a world out there where, you know, Khalil Mack decides to retire, Odafe Oweh gets $28 million, I don't know, from some other team, and the Chargers are kind of stuck there waiting a little bit. So we'll talk about some of those scenarios tonight. But yeah, it's a very interesting free agency cycle for the Chargers, where yes, they have a lot of money, but they also have a lot of guys to re-sign. And you know, it was interesting seeing the pressure rate statistic chart go out today among interior offensive linemen, and Zion was like 10th among left guards, and then Tyler Linderbaum was below Bradley Bozeman in that regard. So a lot of people were talking about Zion and Tyler Linderbaum today. So if you missed that chart, go feel free and look at social media. I'm sure you will not take that long to find it, but free agency discourse is always so funny, because you end the season and everybody's like, I want that guy. Yeah. And then like more stuff comes out and you're like, maybe not, maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, just on that point, this is not the bulk of the show, but I mean, it's rumors of his body breaking down and like an actual history of injuries, wanting center one money potentially, and his numbers being the worst statistical season of his career, and really bad. Not just like, oh, worse, but it was still very good. It wasn't very good. You know, Creed Humphrey, Zach Frazier, those guys are still at the top. That's why Creed Humphrey makes that much money. That's why Frazier will make that much money. Linderbaum, I don't know. What do the Ravens know that we don't?
Yeah, it'll be very, very interesting. Obviously, stuff like this comes out for a reason. Sometimes, you know, teams will leak that, so other teams are not interested. Right. Whatever.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens with Tyler Linderbaum. I would still expect the Chargers to be in the conversation for that, just given the connections and the need. Okay, before we get started there, of course, have to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks. Obviously, we have been working with Prize Picks for the last few years, and we love working with them. It's a great relationship. We also have a lot of fun with it. Tyler's mom famously won them enough money to pay for their trip to Houston for the playoff game off of Prize Picks. So it's fantastic. So whether it is obviously, you know, choosing NFL daily fantasy lineups, or the NBA or college basketball, Prize Picks has you covered. Whatever sport you want to choose, whatever floats your boat, whatever time of season it is. It's very simple. All you have to do is choose 2 players and multiple statistical categories more or less, and then set a lineup. You could go as many as 8 players. I've done one time, which was a mistake. But that was just me. My experience has been 2 or 3, maybe 4 players is kind of how you are a little bit more advantageous for you. Whatever case may be, you can always choose the flex play, where if you're a little uncomfortable with your lineup, you have a little bit of flexibility where you can still win money even if you don't go 4 for 4, 5 for 5, or whatever the case may be. So definitely encourage you guys to go download the PrizePicks app today if you haven't already. Use the code GUILTY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code GUILTY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Okay, let's get into some defensive free agent targets. We wanted to start this episode just kind of discussing our goals and our thought process. And I think you and I we're generally on the same page about a lot of things, but when it comes to looking at this free agency class and looking at the Chargers roster, I think we're kind of feeling just a run it back year for this group. Yeah. And they've already started doing that with Tier Tart, but generally speaking, I would ideally like to retain as much of this defense as possible.
Yeah, as would I. It's not like it didn't work. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If Adafe Owe, as long as it's reasonable enough, he'll make a good amount of money. As long as it's reasonable, would love to have him back. That pairing with Tuli was wonderful. Tart, great. Him being back is awesome. I see that Dean Leonard, not that he's irreplaceable, but I'd feel bad for Ficken to have to basically have revamped his entire group from a year if Leonard is also let go, and if Phillips is let go, Delshon Phillips, that is. So yeah. Chargers should usually hold on to and have a history of letting go guys who are defenders but good special teamers but have the last name Phillips. So instead of Adrian, he should retain Delshon this time. And then Tony Jefferson. I think Tony Jefferson needs to be back. The one thing that we don't have on here as a goal is bringing back Khalil Mack. I think that you and I are perfectly fine with him coming back and would welcome him back. And I think he deserves to be back and deserves to make, a solid 1-year deal or whatever it is to be back. But it's not like, it doesn't feel like an obligation to me, even though I do think he'll be back.
Yeah, I think it's also a little bit more about Khalil. I think if Khalil wants to come back, I think the Chargers will make it happen. And we just don't really know where his head is at in that regard. Obviously, I would expect the Ravens to be very interested if he wants to keep playing. He'll have suitors if he wants to keep playing. You look at whatever free agent ranking list that you're looking at, whether it's The Athletic with Daniel Popper, who did great work there, or PFF or ESPN. Khalil Mack is almost always like right up in that, third or fourth edge rusher spot in those free agent rankings, whether depending on how whoever's ranking them, thinks about like Boye Mafe, who we'll talk about here in a second. But I think Khalil is in the bucket where if it happens, great. I'll be very happy. I love Khalil. But if he wants to leave, I think that's up to him. And I wouldn't be shocked at the end of the day if he feels like, some other team is a better opportunity for him. What I will say about Khalil Mack is that last offseason when we were still unsure if he was trying to figure out if he wanted to come back or if he wanted to retire or whatever, go sign somewhere else. At that time, I was told that he loves living in LA. His family is very happy there. They love living in Manhattan Beach or that area. I don't know specifically where they live, but they love living out on the West Coast. He loves playing for Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter, obviously at that time, is what was mentioned to me. Loves working with Ben Herbert, is a big believer in Ben Herbert as a strength coach. And he really is very happy with his position coaches, Dylan Roney and somewhat, Mike Elston. So he's really happy in LA. I think it really comes down to, does he think this team is the best bet to go win a Super Bowl or heck, he's never won a playoff game. So I think that's really what it comes down to for Khalil. I think there are so few times where, winning is truly everything for that player. But I think in this instance, that is what Khalil has to decide is staying with the Chargers, give me the best chance to win a Super Bowl, or is it the Ravens, or is it somewhere else? And I don't know, man. Like, if I'm a player and I'm seeing Mike McDaniel come to town and the offense, which has kind of really been holding us back the last 2 years, is going to maybe get back on track. And for the most part, the Chargers defensive coaching staff is going to be mostly the same. And I think the Chargers have an incredibly good argument to keep him around. So we didn't put him on here. I think that mostly is a Khalil thing. I would love to have him.
Yeah.
Hope he can stay. The Chargers have the money to make it work. And obviously that would impact things. Like if you do get all 3 edge rushers to stick around, you probably got to go, down a tier at guard or center or something like that. But they definitely have the money to bring all 3 of those guys back.
Yeah, they definitely do. Would love to see Mac back. No problems if he's back at all. Would celebrate it. Other than that, if it comes to, let's say they do all those things, but maybe Mac doesn't come back, I would love them, and we would love them. And we've been asking for them to find a true pass rushing defensive tackle option, to find an edge 3 if Mac or Owe leave. Certainly, if one leaves and you're paying, or both leaves, you're paying a lot more expensive guys. And then just some, Cam Hart competition or Benjamin St. Juste replacement. I think they're always going to need that 5th-ish, 4th-ish corner on the team. And apparently, if you're Jesse Minter and Klingscale, you can find them anywhere, and they become pretty good for you. Of course, this year, no Minter, but I think with Klingscale and these guys, they can find it really anybody. This was definitely the trickiest part for us when we did this slideshow and thought of some names. It's really difficult to find like which dart throw kind of special teams, not quite a starter, but maybe could corner. Very difficult to find an option out there.
Yeah, I think the pass rushing DT, if they are going to go spend an external free agency, would love to see that. Those are trickier to find, generally speaking. And there is one that we'll talk about that's like very, established in that regard. But it's going to be very difficult for them to spend any kind of money on defense if they bring the 3 edge rushers back. So I think I've been asking, people have been asking me a lot about like going out and signing Tariq Woolen or that kind of corner or safety. And I think, we'll talk about some expensive options, but it's almost always as like, if the other guys leave,
Right.
That's kind of where the defense is at, where you're probably retaining most of your guys and then signing some depth options, special teams players, stuff like that.
Yeah, if it were down to Cam Hart, Dante Jackson, and then your 3rd guy was like, let's say, a Benjamin St. Juste last year, then I think you're having that discussion of, okay, go get a Tariq Woolen or go get that, or even draft one at 22. But they have Tarheeb still. And I think even if you don't think Tarheeb still is a CB1, and I don't at this point, because I just, he'll get there, but not right now. I think that you're fine with at least those 2. And so you're just finding somebody behind them to really round out the group.
Yeah. I do think the Chargers, like the way that the cornerback room is discussed online is, I think it leaves out what Derwin James does for this team quite often. A lot of people want them to go find like a true slot corner, and that's fine. If you want them to go do that, I can understand that argument, but Derwin James is essentially a corner for them. Like he is playing the majority of his snaps in the slot. I don't expect that to change. And so it just makes things more difficult for me to like allocate resources to that room where, even if you don't think Dante Jackson and Tariq still are like true lockdown corners, I think they're both really high-end corner 2s. And I think with Derwin being able to lock down the slot, I think that's a really good situation. And so, does it make sense if you're going to go spend, high-end money on a corner and then that corner is just like not better than Dante Jackson or Tariq still, then you're wasting that kind of contract. So it just makes things a little trickier for me in that regard. In terms of spending money at the position. Whereas if you want to draft somebody at 22, then I think that's plausible because that player could be your CB3, CB4, and then next year after Dante Jackson's contract is up, then he moves into a starting role. So there's a little bit more natural, lineage there as opposed to just going out and signing an expensive free agent.
Yeah, there's the wild card of there being a new defensive coordinator, so it is theoretically possible they do just spend somewhere very big, and it surprises us. But based on Joe Ortiz's history, I don't see him suddenly wanting to spend huge and make that big first purchase on defense. It just doesn't really strike me as what the plan would be for this offseason. And frankly, it's not a great group anyway. So I don't think there's no name out there that I think really entices me over, honestly, just running it back.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's get started here. We are going to talk about the interior defensive lineman first. I think if there is one pass rusher on the interior, it's John Franklin Myers that I would be most interested in. He had a down season this past year with 39 pressures and 8 sacks in the regular season, 18 run stops. For the most part, previously, he has been a guy who has gone north of 50 pressures in his career. Denver has a very heavy interior defensive line rotation, and a lot of their, general game plan is it doesn't really lend itself towards somebody like him having, 50, 60 pressures because they have Zach Allen, they blitz a lot, they have the edge rushers, etc. I think he's a really good player. Obviously, the Chargers have the Chad Alexander connection here. He was a part of the front office who brought John Franklin Myers from LA to New York. He was also a part of the regime that traded him from New York to Denver, for what it's worth. But there is a connection. Very familiar with him as a skill set. I think the positive here is that this would allow, Justin Eboigbe to really kind of settle into a nice rotational role. And I think that he did take a nice leap forward, but he's not stopping me from really upgrading the interior pass rush spot, especially after how we watched, the final 4 teams in the NFL had just really strong interior defensive line groups. And I think the Chargers are just like one piece away from really elevating themselves. And I think Franklin Myers could potentially get that, get them to that point. From the risk standpoint, he will be 30 in September. There's not a ton of data on like pass rushing defensive tackles right now because it is such a recent development in the NFL where, generally speaking, you didn't really have this amount of players at the defensive tackle spot hitting 40, 50, 60 pressures, back in the day. So what does that mean for his athletic prime? How long are you actually getting out of him? But I feel like you could potentially get him for 2 or 3 more years at a really high level still at this point. And then he did finish the worst statistical season of his career this past season. So his contract projection is really all over the place. I can't remember what Popper had, but he reportedly wants to get paid like, top level defensive tackle spot. And that's why he hasn't signed an extension in Denver. So we'll see what happens. He's by far the best defensive lineman available. So I do think he will get paid. Is this like a Milton Williams situation where you're talking about like $26 million? Probably not. But you're probably talking about 18 plus ish, just, if I had to guess and put a number on it. So very expensive, definitely getting a little bit older. But for the Chargers, I think it would be worth it to just like elevate the defensive line overall and finally get that true difference making pass rusher type.
Yeah, this is the one area, whether you want to say free agency at 22, even a post or it's not a pre-deadline trade in the middle of the season. I feel like D tackle, a pass rusher is where they should look. It just feels like that missing piece. I think Eboigbe is going to take a nice step forward as he did last year. That isn't enough, I don't think. If it is enough, great. And Elston we trust. Why do I doubt him? But I think that all that going into one player who I believe also had a back issue in college. Not that it's been an issue in the NFL, but just things to keep in mind. It'd be nice to invest in a more certain option heading into, again, what I really think is going to be the best season the Chargers could possibly have this upcoming season. And I want to maximize that, and finding a pass rusher at D tackle would be a great way to go. I know they have Tart. I know they have Caldwell. They're pretty good. They can get after the passer, but they don't strike me as a true pass rush type like Franklin Myers. I'd be stunned if either of those guys had 40 pressures next year.
Yeah. They are better pass rushers than they are given credit for, particularly Tart, who when he's at the 3-tech spot, I think he can actually like really, crush the pocket and get after a little bit more, as we saw in the playoff game. But the good thing about those two guys is that whoever they bring into the defensive line room, I think those two are versatile enough where they can complement that player. And so, we'll get to draft prospects, later at this position. But if they wanted to go get like a true nose tackle difference maker, I don't think Tart and Caldwell are stopping you from doing that, because both of them can play all across the line. You just have to figure out, like, from a pass rushing perspective, what does that do for you? But again, we have a lot of time for that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Next up here is Mr. Logan Hall from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of rinse and repeat here with these names in the sense that we're looking for a pass rushing defensive tackle type. So I'm kind of going to skip through a lot of this, but 32 pressures, 2 sacks, 17 stops last year, 24th in pass rush win rate among defensive tackles. This is the guy you're hoping that Elston and these guys can turn into what they were projected to be. This is a guy who was picked 33rd overall, so practically a first round pick, and just hasn't had the season that I think a lot of people thought that he would. I don't believe I watched him coming out of the draft just because I don't think there was a ton of film for me that was accessible to us at the time. So I don't have an opinion on him pre-draft or anything, but it's been a disappointment. When you pick 33rd overall, it should be a bit more than you've been producing there. So this just strikes me as a very easy, much more inexpensive option for the Chargers to find a pass rusher.
Yeah, will definitely not cost the Chargers a lot. He is probably heading towards like a prove it contract. But sometimes these teams, man, will see, 33rd overall pick and traits and be very excited and sign him to a bigger number than we thought. So like Javon Kinlaw signed this last year for like, I think it was like $12 million a year kind of thing. And he was from a first round pick and traits and all that stuff. So I don't know if he's going to get that kind of money, but somebody out there is going to think, man, I can fix that. And there's traits here and upside, and defensive tackle takes a long time to develop and all of that stuff. So it's definitely possible here. I think with Logan Hall, you're probably trying to get like a second version of Justin Eboigbe, like that's the kind of, caliber of player I think you're looking towards as opposed to upgrading over Justin Eboigbe.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I muted myself there. I could be wrong. Is Logan Hall, granted, this is a few years ago now, did he work with Coach Ed? Same as Mac?
I feel like yes.
I'm just curious if there's any, like, I don't know. But then Coach Ed's doing his own thing now these days.
Yeah, Sacramento State.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up here, Draymond Jones, who is a defensive lineman, defensive tackle, edge rusher kind of hybrid. We've talked about Draymond Jones a lot as a potential addition. But then he got moved to the Ravens. And so now he's played for Mike McDonald. He's played for Denard Wilson. He's played for Zach Orr and John Harbaugh. So there is definitely a lot of, schematic overlap here. Does he want to play defensive tackle now, or does he want to be a true edge rusher? Remains to be seen. But even as he's pivoted more towards the edge spot, he has still continued to play a lot of like interior rusher kind of snaps, not A gap snaps by any means. But he is definitely more leading edge than interior guy. He had 43 pressures and 5 sacks, 15 stops this past season. He was 27th in pass rush win rate among qualified edge rushers. So a lot of connections, good player.
Yeah.
You could potentially, talk me into him being, a Khalil Mack kind of replacement if Khalil decides to retire. PFF projects him 2 years, $20 million, for his services going forward.
Yeah, he's a player that obviously he's bounced around. I can't believe they all are somehow tied into Harbaugh in some way, or some Harbaugh connection by first or second degree. If it's 2 years, $20 million, there's not really another option out there that can walk in and give you somewhere between 40 and 60 pressures for $10 million a year. I just don't see an option out there. We've wanted Draymond Jones since the draft, since before you and I were even doing this podcast. So, for whatever reason, hasn't quite stuck anywhere, even though he's produced a fair amount. Just has never found like a long-term home, and he wouldn't with the Chargers, but worth keeping an eye on because there's, like you said, McDonald, Denard Wilson, the Baltimore connections. It's clearly something in that system and in those circles and those people works. So might as well collect the last Infinity Stone and play for Jim Harbaugh. Yeah,
I was looking him up on Twitter, and it does sound like a lot of Ravens fans think that he will be back. They have their own kind of edge rusher situation to sort out. But we'll see. $20 million for 2 years for him, I think, is a good deal. If that's all it costs, I think you can definitely stand to reason to bring him in as a Khalil Mack replacement. Next on here is Sheldon Rankins.
Yep. So last year had 38 pressures, 3 sacks, and 22 stops. There's the Chad Alexander connection, which I think has, as we've seen 2 years in a row now, has meant more than maybe we thought. It's very much like Baltimore West for the Chargers, but there's a lot of New York Jets connections there from one way or another. I think he's just very well-rounded and fits that size profile. I think he's 305 or something like that. And that's the other thing. Draymond Jones, not that weight. Granted, he's not playing interior defensive line anymore, I don't think, or I don't think he would with the Chargers. Rankins is a guy that fits that. I'm a little concerned that his 2 best years are, it's like, oh, I went with the Houston Texans. Pretty good. And then everywhere else with the Saints, with the Jets, with the Bengals, it's been rough, under 25 pressures every year since 2018.
Yeah.
So when you get to play with the Texans and that secondary and those edge rushers,
Really nice.
Really nice, pretty good. And he had the thick six. I believe this is the celebration of that wonderful thick six from the playoffs.
I thought that was Tommy Togiai.
Maybe not. Never mind. I don't know. He's a big guy, and maybe he scored a touchdown at one point. Anyway, fits the size profile. Pretty well-rounded player. Wouldn't mind it.
Yeah, he's until the Houston days, he had such a strong reputation of being a really good run defender, and then with Houston, he just pops as 38, 40 pressure. So whatever they're doing down there, is working. So Brandon Hallam says that he did have two thick sixes, and then Togiai also had another one.
Houston, Texas, D tackles feasting.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot to like here. I think he could still give you a good amount of pass rush juice, but he's not your stereotypical like 3 technique pass rushing type. He is definitely more run defense first, pass rush second, but I think it would still work going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Next on here is Roy Lopez of the Detroit Lions. Former Trevor Sikkema favorite, if I remember correctly, from the draft days back in the day. 13 pressures, 8 sacks is an insane rate. That's usually not how that goes.
No,
for pass rush
not at all.
He did have 14 run stops this past season. Definitely more of a run stuffing kind of defensive tackle type. We put on here more productive Naquan Jones. I feel like that's pretty similar. And they definitely also played with Houston and Arizona. So you get what you get. This is more of your that Naquan Jones kind of run defense type. And again, you would still probably need to go get a pass rusher elsewhere. But we've seen the Chargers take this kind of player like 4 years in a row, not 4 years in a row, the last 2 years in a row, and really turn them into the best versions of themselves. So somebody like Roy Lopez, if you are not able to bring back like Deshaun Hand, for example, could be that kind of player where, we see him sign a 1 year, $2.5 million contract. And then next year where he's getting, a $6 million contract or whatever the case may be, because Mike Elston is awesome at his job.
100%. It's 3 sacks, by the way. Why do I have 8 there? I have no idea. It's 3
that makes more sense. I was like, whoa, 13 and 8.
Yeah, no, he'd be paying a lot more than that if he somehow got 8 sacks on 13 pressures, which would be nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, I was just like, okay, a lot of pass rushing options, but in the off chance they could just bring back Naquan Jones, although I think he's happy. I think they should be looking for, and this is kind of like a name and a profile that is just exactly kind of what the Chargers would do. So Naquan Jones was like a 9 pressure guy, I think, joining the Chargers, another 300-ish pound, not quite a true, like just a nose, but basically. I don't know how it's possible that this guy has also played with Houston and Arizona and the Chargers if he signs here at the same as Naquan Jones did. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just random occurrences and coincidences, but
yeah,
I was looking for any name, bigger guy. Granted, his RAS, I think he's like 296, but on the Lions website, he's 312. I think on PFF, he was like 318 or something like that. Let's call it 300 pounds. So fits the size profile, nose tackle-ish type. You get what you get. I'm not expecting some crazy upside here, but I mean, what did Tart have before he joined the Chargers? Poona Ford wasn't playing. So I'm all for another guy that just gives you that extra option.
Yeah. Naquan Jones still hangs out with other Chargers players and lives in LA, by the way, in case anybody was wondering about that.
See you soon, I guess.
Yeah. Next on here is our first direct Ravens. I guess Draymond Jones is, but another Ravens connection here. Chris Wormley, the defensive tackle who played last season in Indianapolis.
Yeah, barely played. Played is a strong word there, I guess. 4 pressures, 1 sack, 2 stops. Did not have 8 sacks, as I mistakenly wrote for the other one. Why target him? The connections with Michigan, with the Ravens, and now, of course, with Pittsburgh, with Martin coming over. Granted, was not his position coach, but was an outside linebackers coach over there with Pittsburgh. That Pittsburgh connection does open up some more wrinkles for the Chargers. I feel like we've just been kind of clutching at Ravens or Jets or maybe Giants for the last couple of years, but now we get, of course, the Dolphins and now the Steelers. Not that it's always how that works, but worth mentioning. He'll be 33. He's been under 100 snaps since 2022. He's not going to walk in and be a high upside guy. He might not even make the roster, but just given the connections to, enough members of this staff, worth mentioning just because, he could sign and maybe he's cut, but just keep an eye on him.
Yeah. Alex Silva asking about how many defensive, all of them. You want to carry 5 on the 53-man roster. So obviously the Chargers have Tier Tart, Jamari Caldwell, and Justin Eboigbe under contract. Technically speaking, Scott Matlock as well. So I think they will sign some kind of veteran to fill out that room. They could bring back Deshaun Hand, and then they'll draft another one to get them to 5 or 6-ish, depending on how you look at Scott Matlock and what his role is on offense and things like that. So, they're not overhauling the defensive tackle room by any means, but I think they will add some free agent and then draft somebody as well.
I agree.
All right, edge rushers. First up here is Kwity Paye, the former Michigan Wolverine, current Indianapolis Colts. 38 pressures, 4 sacks, and 29 stops this past season. He was a 10.8 pass rush win rate guy this last year, which was 68th out of 125 qualified edge rushers. So right about in the middle of the pack there. 65.8 run defense grade, 13 run stops, which was 48th. Feel like he definitely is more of a run defender than a true pass rusher at this point in time. Obviously, the Michigan connections. He did train with Coach Ed, in case you were wondering about that. And then you put compensatory pick game on here. Was he cut?
No, not necessarily that. It's if they sign him and it's a 1-year prove it deal, then he walks the following year. So future,
I got you.
Not current anything. Yeah.
And again, this is more of a letting Khalil or Odafe Owe get leaving free agency kind of player here. Over the cap has him at $9.8 million. He was not listed on PFF. I don't think Papa wrote about him either. So, I think like a 1-year, $10 million contract does kind of, make sense-ish for Kwity Paye.
Yeah, it is very possible we start seeing, especially with the lack of draft picks the next couple of years, we see Joe Ortiz and just trusting the staff to go, okay, every year we'll have, our 1 to 2 edge rushers that are our foundation. We'll find a third guy that we just cycle through every year. You make him special, he goes elsewhere. I don't know if the Ravens have. I don't think the Ravens did that via comp, like the comp pick game as much, but they were always finding a third edge rusher in free agency. Although it was like Kyle Van Noy, Jadeveon Clowney, and those guys. So I think that style works for them. It makes sense. If Mac is gone, if Owe is gone, let's say it's Tuli and Owe. Go find a third guy. I've liked the draft class that I've watched so far. So to me, like, you could also just draft a guy. Right. But if you want to solve it ahead of free agency, I'm fine with Kwity Paye.
Yeah. I think in an ideal world, if Khalil Mack leaves or Owe leaves, I think you are taking an edge rusher early. But if they also wanted to supplement that with somebody else like a Kwity Paye, that would be an expensive edge rusher room, probably. But again, you can never have enough pass rushers, as they say. All right, next on here is Boye Mafe. So a Mike McDonald connection adjacent here for the Chargers.
Yeah, Boye Mafe was not the biggest fan of his coming out of college, but he was an absolute freak of an athlete, and you could turn the corner like crazy. 44 pressures, 2 sacks, 2 hits, including the playoffs last year. 61st in pass rush win rate, not great. 65.1 run defense grade, 12th in run stops. Was definitely never the run defender. That was part of the problem for my evaluation of him. Pre-draft, seems like he's never quite become that either. Plenty of scheme overlap, of course, with Mike McDonald last year. And I think there is some potential positive regression in a larger role. He played under 610 snaps in the regular season the last 2 years, which isn't Chris Wormley's less than 100, but under 610 is not exactly a starter either. I don't love the missed tackle rate the last couple of years. 20.5 and 17.6 missed tackle rate is not great. So not great against the run, missing tackles, has quietly just lost his starter, unquestioned starter role with the Seahawks. So, a bit worrisome there. But I think with any of these guys that we list today, we're looking for guys that Not that McDonald's group wasn't great. Clearly, they won the Super Bowl. They're one of the best defenses to win the Super Bowl lately. But I think they can do something with Mafe, get him involved. 3 years to $49 million here via PFF's projection. I believe that's cheaper than Owe's, right?
Yeah, significantly. Yeah.
Owe was what, 22?
Popper had Owe at 22. I think PFF had him at 18 per year.
Okay, so this would be a little bit cheaper. Yeah, not 49. I don't. This I think might be old too, so I have no idea if this is an updated one. Popper's is 22. That was the edge 14 or something, 13 kind of money for Owe. Yeah. So Mafe at 3 years 49 is a good swap.
PFF has Owe at 4 for 77, which is 19.25 per year.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Next on here is Arnold Ebiketie, the edge rusher from the Falcons. Obviously formerly of the Penn State Nittany Lions. 25 pressures, 2 sacks, 17 stops this last year. He's always been more of a DPR type, and he has been very efficient in that regard with the pass rush win rate metrics. He was tied for 13th this past season, which would have led the Chargers. So why are you targeting him? He is kind of your Owe light replacement. So hypothetically speaking, Khalil Mack returns, as you have here on the screen. The Chargers will need some kind of designated pass rusher type here to fill the Owe role. I think it's very obvious that the Chargers want to do the 3 edge rusher look as much as possible. I do think that's going to be something that O'Leary carries over. So you're going to want some kind of bendier, twitchier athlete to kind of balance out Tuli and Khalil. And so Arnold Ebiketie would make sense for that. And then also plays potentially into the comp game going forward. Very much not a run defender. That was the case coming out of the draft, similar to Mafe, and that has panned out in the NFL. So, Owe was a much better run defender than I think even I thought he would be. So maybe there is something the Chargers can maximize there a little bit more. But Ebiketie is also a lot smaller than Odafe Owe, and Owe has like ridiculously long arms. So, that doesn't help here, but he would be a lot cheaper. You're talking about $8 million per year, according to PFF, 2 years, 16 million total. So I wouldn't be opposed to this. I do think like in the world where Matt comes back, Owe leaves, I would like to see them go after somebody like this. And Ebiketie is probably on the like higher end of the true designated pass rusher types. And so I would be in favor of it.
Yeah, me too. Still young. If it takes the 2-year deal here, he plays for 2 years. He walks when he's 29, can get another contract. Again, some comp pick stuff potentially. I was a big fan of his. Of course, there were the shortcomings, but as a pure pass rusher, I thought he was awesome coming out of college and has like efficiency wise been pretty good. The good news is he isn't a horrible human being. So if the Falcons let him walk for whatever else they're keeping over there, have at it. But I would love for Ebiketie to join the Chargers if Owe walks. I don't think it's a necessity that he's a great run defender. Like you said, Owe is much bigger. Just RAS is ridiculous. So different kind of body there. But Ebiketie as the third option for them, if they go with Mack and Tuli, would be nice.
I think Ebiketie wasn't a first rounder, right? He was a second rounder.
No, he was a second round pick. I looked it up. I think he was 38th overall. Yeah, so pretty close. Sense.
Yeah,
but
that checks out for sure. Next on here is the aforementioned Jadeveon Clowney.
All right, everybody, we're doing it again. It's been every year since I've been alive. I feel like we've talked about Jadeveon Clowney to the Chargers, and every year he does produce. Like Jadeveon Clowney, no one seems to want to retain this guy for whatever reason. Khalil Mack did his best impression last year against the Houston Texans from that one hit. 40 pressures last year, 9 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, 17th in pass rush win rate, which is actually pretty good. Very, very quietly.
Yeah.
A very good season from him.
He was much better than I like from a statistical standpoint.
Yeah.
Much better than I would have guessed, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it was the second game Joe Alt played was against him, and he just kind of erased him. It didn't look like he had any of that left. And I always thought of him now as just like a chip in as a rusher, but definitely maybe a run defender. But to have that kind of efficiency and those numbers is pretty good. 70.6 run defense grades, 17th in total run stops, which is tied for 18th among edge rushers. Obviously, there's a Ravens connection. He's very scheme versatile at this point. He's played for 5 teams? Or this would be his 5th team, if I'm not mistaken.
This would be technically his 7th different team if he leaves.
So that scheme versatility is the name of the game right there. And still pretty effective. Like to jump from this place to that place to this place to that place. the different parts of his career, it's been pretty good, pretty impressive. Turned 33 last week, so still producing, but he did turn 33. And then, oh, you have it right here. I should just read 6 teams and 7 seasons since leaving Houston. So the projection is 1 year, $10 million. Definitely a more well-rounded short term, but more well-rounded option than like an Ebiketie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this could be a compliment to Owe. Like if Khalil retires or leaves, Jadeveon as your edge 3, I think it is not the worst plan in the world, and he can do a lot of the dirty work still. He didn't play the first like 5 games, I think, in Dallas. So, 40 pressures in about 12 games, I think is great. So this is a guy who I think is much better than he is giving kind of credit for online. He's been kind of this mercenary edge rusher for his entire career, basically ever since leaving Houston. But he's almost always like in the 40 pressures, like 15 run stop kind of range. And if you're going to pay that guy $10 million, that's pretty good, man. Like for this kind of role that you're expecting out of him. I think this would be like the best possible version of a Bud Dupree. Somebody who can come in and still be that veteran presence, actually like truly benefit your team. And again, just he's able to work in basically any kind of scheme. Jim Schwartz's scheme is so different than what Evero was running, and very different than what Mike McDonald is running, etc. So again, this is more for me, like having Khalil and Clowney is probably not ideal. I think you would like to get younger in that instance, but yeah, Clowney as your edge 3 behind Thule and Owe, I think would be kind of nice.
Yeah. Last year he signed in September, so this could also be a possible post draft signing. Although I think this is a better year for him, so maybe not.
Yeah. Next on here,
getting younger.
Former Charger, former Steven twin, Kyle Van Noy. Tyler does the pictures for anybody wondering.
Yeah, Steven is not that vain. I did this for Yokes. He would not post this himself.
No.
So Kav, for those who don't know, there was a running joke from one Chargers fans, and then eventually like half of all the trench players on the Chargers, that Steven looked like Kyle Van Noy. Funny enough that they have a Utah BYU rivalry, so that's just even funnier. It's like evil Steven or something. Anyway, 27 pressures.
Before you continue,
I'm sorry.
Brooke and I went to a Clovis West football game, which is where Brooke teaches. And we like sat down next to somebody that her family knew, who did go to BYU. And we were like talking with them. And then like halfway through the conversation, it was an older lady. Halfway through the conversation, she like turns to me and she's like, you kind of look like Kyle Van Noy. And I'm like, no way this is happening right now. There's no way that somebody outside of the Chargers actually thinks this. And she did. She was like, no, like seriously, like you look like Kyle Van Noy. So I'm never beating the allegations, basically, is what I'm saying.
That's hilarious because I mean, I can't imagine like in person you guys necessarily look the same. But if we just look at like the face of you guys, 100%. So someone seeing you in public. I'm sorry, Steven's an offensive lineman. And
I'm white, and Kyle Van Noy is not white.
I wasn't gonna bring it up. But there's a few key differences.
Yeah.
Steven, infinitely more handsome, by the way. So of course, sorry, Kyle. He's the handsome Squidward version of Kyle Van Noy, who's now not going to join the Chargers because of that. Anyway, what was the point? Okay, I'll just go through the numbers. 27 pressures, 2 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, 52, 13, and 9 in 2024. 108th in pass rush win rate is where's his bar with Bud Dupree's 72.5 run defense grade, 8 run stops, which was 84th. Why target him? He's a Bud Dupree replacement. There's some scheme overlap, of course. He was a previous Charger. He'll make Herbert study more, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, he is coming obviously off the worst season of his career. He is getting up there in age. He went on the Pat McAfee show after the season and did kind of imply that he was dealing with some injury issues this past season. So I don't know. In Baltimore, he's been kind of a 50 pressure guy outside of last year. So, do you think that he can kind of bounce back to that form? I think is potentially worth having that conversation. But this to me is like, you have whatever duo come back. You draft somebody in the first round and hey man, like let's kind of round out the room with a 4th edge rusher who we know can kind of give us some situational stuff here and there. And that's what Kyle Van Noy would be for me at this point in time.
Yes.
Next on here, we're doing this is kind of a character thing
back,
of
baby.
ourselves. But Josh Uche, man, like he had a much better season than I think was kind of given credit for. He did miss 8 games of the season, but in the 9 games played that he had 23 pressures, just the 1 sack and 1 quarterback hit. But he was 17.4% pass rush win rate, which was 9th out of any qualified edge rusher, 69.5 run defense grade, and 11 total run stops, which is 58th. So he had more run stops than Boye Mafe and about the same kind of pass rush win rate, actually a much higher pass rush win rate. So again, this is a rotational DPR kind of type. If you lose OA, this is the kind of player I think you're targeting in free agency to kind of make up the difference here. You know, will be very, very cheap. He signed, I think, for like a $5 million contract in Philadelphia this last year. There's obviously the Michigan connection. He's always been a high level pass rush win rate guy. And for whatever reason, he's just never really been able to carve out more of a role than that, despite actually having like a pretty good track record of run defense grades and run stops. So
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on there in terms of the run defense, but I know that he can, have a high level win rate and give you some speed off the edge. And I think that would, again, that kind of role would make a lot of sense. Probably a lot cheaper than Arnold Ebiketie because Ebiketie is much younger coming off of his rookie contract. Uche's been around for 7 years, I think, off the top of my head. So probably like a 1 year, $5 to $6 million contract again. And he's your rotational pass rusher behind whatever starting duo you have.
Yep, I love it. When the Chiefs got him, I was actually kind of bummed that they got him, but it never really materialized into much. But the Eagles get him, great efficiency, all for it, inexpensive. Why doesn't he stick? I don't know, but hope he sticks with the Chargers.
It was very much like not a Chiefs kind of defensive end.
True.
And then they didn't play him, so it was weird. It was like, oh man, that sucks that they got him, and then they just didn't play him. So it was strange.
Yeah.
Next on here, I think this is our last edge rusher is Carl Lawson.
All right. For the guys that I get at the very end of these slides, there's clearly a kind of a progression or regression, I suppose, of the amount of snaps played by the time we get to the end of these groupings. Carl Lawson, 26 snaps in 2025. 1 stop, 0 pressures. That's 1 more stop than I had last year, I guess. Had in 2024 with the Cowboys, had 27 pressures, 6 sacks, 10 stops. There is a connection with the Jets, with John Harbaugh, of course, the Ravens last year. He'll cost nothing. This is a guy with, he doesn't have a significant injury history. His production is dropping. But I think if you're looking for a 5th or 6th guy to bring in just to see if he sticks, Carl Lawson, keep an eye on him.
Yeah. This is more of a late, back end of the room kind of competition.
100%.
Yeah, I got you. All right. Before we get to some secondary and linebacker pieces, our audio audience is going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. Okay, so again, secondary pieces, we're going to be, kind of looking for more rotational types. So we're not going to be mentioning like Tariq Woolen and things like that. But first on the list is a Miami connection, Rasul Douglas.
Look, guys, I don't know there are 2 players in the NFL that seem to never stick anywhere despite actually some good numbers. One's Dalton Reisner, who I think was like 5th on that pass blocking win rate chart that just popped up. Yeah. I don't know why he doesn't stick anywhere, and he always signs late, but he's always good. Same thing for Rasul Douglas. For whatever reason, I feel like no one seems to want to hold on to this guy, and yet they sign him and he performs. He was 10th in passer rating when targeted last year, 17th in coverage grade, 29th in forced incompletion rate, and 14th in run stop rate. This is a trickier one, but to me, I with Benjamin St-Juste and Cam Hart playing about a combined 900 snaps outside last year. No, I lied. Each of them played, I believe, about 900 snaps outside last year. Are we sure Hart is going to be that guy post-Minter? I think they feel that way, but just in case, there's an option here in Rasul Douglas. He signed for $1.5 million last year. Like, nobody wanted this guy. He was part of my free agent, all in on the defense episode. And at the time, he was projected to sign for more. And he turns in a good season, and here we are again. And on the list of free agents, he's just like not projected to get much. But this is a guy who's overperformed his contract. His valuation from over the cap, based on his numbers, was almost $14 million. So it's a guy, again, 1 year, 1.5, outperformed the contract value of like $14 million a year. He's not going to command that much. I don't know why this guy keeps bouncing around. He does not stick. Everywhere he goes, he seems to find some amount of success. I considered him for the Chargers way back in the day. I think 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So if they are looking for a veteran option who isn't going to demand to be a starter, who isn't going to command all that much money, but is reliable, and they're looking for like a Benjamin St. Juste bigger body type, Rasul Douglas is almost exclusively it, because you're not paying him, $12-15 million a year.
Yeah, he's always mentioned by like the film community. Like every time I listen to a free agency thing with like the Athletic Football Show or Nate Tyson, those guys, they always bring him up as somebody that's good and should be sticking around more. Good for the Packers, good for the Bills, good for the Dolphins. So at some point, this cornerback who is over 30 is probably going to decline, but until he does, like it just doesn't make any sense why he's not more highly sought after. So. I would be. He is kind of more of a Dante Jackson stylistically, as opposed to like Cam Hart and Benjamin St. Juste, but he's a good player and he tackles. And there's a lot of high end pass rush production, or pass coverage production, I should say. Next on here is Joshua Williams, another player who was interviewed on this channel a few years back ahead of the draft. Great interview with Matty Schmidt. Definitely more of like a dart throw corner than Rasul Douglas. Williams had 255 total special teams last season, 988 for his career. So he is kind of more of your CB4, 5, maybe even 6, depending on the situation, kind of roster. Did not really play a whole lot this past year on defense. I think he had like 20 something snaps on defense, if I'm not mistaken. In 2024, he allowed 20 receptions and 196 yards on 33 targets and had 4 pass breakups. So pretty good, production in terms of, being that back end of the roster kind of guy, and, being able to come in for the Chiefs and play a man heavy role. Contrary to Rasul Douglas, he absolutely fits the size kind of profile of Cam Hart and Benjamin St. Juste. He's 6'3", 33-inch arms. And I think you are doing kind of a low cost bet on traits with man coverage experience, which is kind of similar to what they did with Benjamin St. Juste. Like, I think that you're talking about a very similar player in that regard, but St. Juste played way more in Washington than Williams did because he was drafted higher and he was in a bad, roster situation. So Williams is not as, quote unquote proven, if you want to say, as St. Juste was, who had way more opportunities. He was demoted from his CB role previously to CB6 this year. Like, he was behind Christian Fulton, and I forget the rookie they took from Cal, also last name Williams, if I'm not mistaken. And he did have a missed tackle rate, which really surprised me because I actually really liked his tackling ability on tape as a prospect. 19.4, not ideal at corner. So that's probably why he got demoted a little bit, maybe. So again, will be very cheap. Will not cost you a lot. Could play some special teams, be your 5th or 6th corner on the roster, provide some competition, size, and all that stuff.
No Williams is Thomas Martinez. I could not pull that. I knew it was a short name. That's about it. I would love this because, well, 1, we interviewed him, so that's cool. 2, and really the most importantly, I know the Chargers are going to turn him into a superstar. He's going to be awesome for the Chargers, and I just want to stick it to the Chiefs so bad. This is like exactly Benjamin St. Juste, who, I mean, if you want a test of taking a player that nobody wanted and no fan really liked when they signed him and turning him into someone that we go like, hey, this guy's pretty good. That was the test. Like, that Benjamin St. Juste was the test. I think Joshua Williams fits the same kind of thing to a T. We'd love to see him on here.
Yeah, I agree. All right, next on here is another one that we talked a lot about as an addition, Greg Newsome.
Yes, this is the let Klingscale cook decision here. Last year was not a good year for him. 582 yards and 5 touchdowns allowed. He was, of course, traded to the Jaguars from the Browns with like a corner swap. 2 passes broken up, 1 pick, 107.2 passer rating allowed. Worst of his career. He's been trending downward. This is a guy who was like an all rookie kind of team player when he first started. I think we had 24 passes broken up his first 3 years and only 5 the last 2 years. Just has not been the same kind of player. He's not even listed as like a on P. Granted, PFF's contracts are way behind what they used to. I feel like at this point we had 300 names with contracts, so I don't really know. It's not that he's getting a vet minimum, but it's just a bit of a downward spiral for him. He's not going to be as expensive as I would have thought. This is someone that you and I have held in pretty high regard in terms of like trade candidates the last couple of years, and he just didn't do well last year, and has been trending downward. But to me, I mean, you want somebody who can play inside, outside. That Kling scale will just turn into someone who's awesome. And this is a player who someone will definitely pay in free agency if he hits again. I'm all for it. I don't know where he's looking to go. I don't even know how much of a role he'll have on this team. If you sign a Greg Newsome, I'm assuming he's a pretty involved starter for this team. Is it even worth it because you have your inside outside guy with Tarheeb still? I don't necessarily know, but it's a name to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think I would be really curious to see like what really happened in Jacksonville, because you search him up on Twitter and there's not a lot of positive things from the Jacksonville side of things from that trade, which is still like one of the more bizarre trades I can remember, him and Tyson Campbell. So
yeah,
I think when he's more in kind of a man heavy defense, you're probably getting more value there, just given like his aggressive nature here. But I love Newsome coming out of Northwestern. I think he's still a really good player. You would definitely be buying the dip, which is kind of what the Chargers have been doing at corner, and trying to maximize that player later on. So we know how volatile corner can be, and I think Greg Newsome has some positive play in him to rebound going forward.
Yep.
Next on here is another Miami connection with Kader Kohu. He did tear his ACL in July, so 0 snaps in 2025. A lot of familiarity, obviously, with the Miami side of things. This is certainly a buy low situation. Definitely better in the slot before he was injured, and but he does have a lot of outside flexibility. A guy I remember him and Keenan having some really nice battles with. I think is more on the undersized side of things. Even though Derwin plays so much in the slot, I do think you want a backup there that you trust without having to automatically put Tarheeb still there. And so somebody like Kader Kohu, even coming off of the injury, I think could make some sense for them, assuming he's willing and available to play that kind of backup role. So good tackler, good coverage guy, definitely more slot, but I think somebody I could see them being interested in, just given having some Derwin insurance is not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look through how many slot snaps the Chargers had last year from non-Derwin, and still, and by DBs. Let me see. Okay, not much. But Nico Reed played 41, Tony Jefferson 32, Molden 29, Mickens, Hart, even Hart played 23. I don't remember Cam Hart playing slot corner, but there it is.
All right. Next on here is Jabril Peppers.
Long story short, I feel like we've all been doing this one for a million years. They need another safety, potentially safety 5, special teams player. This is kind of going to kick out Kendall Williamson, who they kept on the roster last year. And, if they want to keep him, go for it. But just worth mentioning him, trying to bring up some more names on here.
Yeah. Steelers connection. So worth it. But he was actually like pretty good for the Patriots, and then just like not a factor at all for the Steelers. So very interested to see like what potentially could have gone on there. But yeah. Oh, Thomas Martinez's Hart lined up against tight ends in the slot.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right, let's get to some linebackers here. We'll start with a Michigan connection, Mr. Devin Bush. One of the weirder profiles in terms of how did he get to this kind of point where PFF is talking about him as a 3-year, $36 million contract, their highest ranked free agent linebacker. So just a really interesting journey to this point. It took him 6 years to break out at linebacker, and linebacker is definitely a position that takes a long time to develop, but 6 years is a little much. That being said, he was great for the Browns the last 2 seasons, including this season, 8 pressures, 2 sacks, 125 total tackles, 87.6 overall PFF grade, was 4th best. He had 30 total run stops, which was 15th most. It's hard to get better than that, man. Like at linebacker, you're dealing with a very difficult scheme, in Cleveland that leaves you on an island quite a lot as a linebacker. And so played well. There's the Michigan and Steelers connection. Steelers stuff is not really that great. Again, very poor production in Pittsburgh, but there is the connection. So the risks are obviously he's getting a little bit older in age at this point in time. Still pretty young. I think he's like 28. Took him that long, 6 years to break out. But I think at linebacker, this would be your long-term solution. How does that affect Dan Henley? Could be, a potential risk as well. And that really is the big thing for signing a potential linebacker is what does that do for Dan Henley?
Yeah, it's a tricky spot ahead of apparently a very good linebacker class that I'm going to ask Thomas Martinez about and not watch it all because who wants to do that? With this linebacker group, we've discussed it, but I have no idea what they want to do because they could add anybody at any spot at linebacker, and I go, that makes sense. They could add a linebacker 1 over Henley. They could add a linebacker 2 that complements Henley. They could add a linebacker 3 who, maybe they want to go with Troy Dye as a starter. Maybe they draft somebody. Maybe they have a linebacker over Colson. Maybe they're linebacker over Marlo Wax. Maybe they have a Delshon Phillips replacement. They could do anything here. And so there's this list is kind of a mix of what they could do's. I'm not a huge fan. I know I made fun of Brandon Staley because he never spent money on linebackers. I don't know if I'm this is the one that has the risk to me. Not everyone. Some people in the chat, some Chargers fans are worried that, Odafe Owe, once he gets the money, is he going to be good? Older-ish linebacker who took 6 years to break out, who could make $12 million a year. That's a bit worrisome for me. But this is also the GM. No, I'm sorry. He was an assistant GM. No, he wasn't. Personnel. But with the Ravens,
basically assistant GM.
Yeah, they traded for Roquan Smith, and they gave him a ginormous contract. So this is a potential precedent there, but they would go out and get a premium linebacker to either pair with or start ahead of Deion Henley. And this is the first time granted it's not been very long, but it's a new defensive coordinator and it's a new linebackers coach. I don't know what their preference is. I mean, O'Leary could feel differently as well. So I don't know what their preference is, what they're looking for here. So Devin Bush is the most expensive available option if they consider it.
Yeah. Next on this list is another Chad Alexander connection, Quincy Williams.
Yeah, I don't really necessarily buy that this would be the route they would go because this is kind of like an over Deion Henley sort of thing, but not a Perryman type that I think we're maybe more so looking for. Sure. 9 pressure, 61 tackles, 42 stops last year. He was benched for a bit for quote unquote underperformance. He said the coaches felt he was underperforming as far back as training camp, whatever that means. They're a hot mess. The Jets are a whole effing hot mess. Yes. And this was also not that Chad Alexander was the one coaching this guy up, but he was with the Jaguars, if I'm not mistaken, for 2 years, and then went to the Jets and then just flourished and became a first-team All-Pro. And so you're kind of looking for, can this guy go from the worst situation you could possibly think of, sorry, Arjun, to, the Chargers in a much better defensive and stable ecosystem. And flourish there. So it's difficult. You don't want to catch the falling sword necessarily. If for some reason he is actually continuing to go and trend downhill, do you want that? I don't know. Is it really even the type they need at linebacker? Not necessarily, but this guy's available. He was at one point in 2023 a very good linebacker. Yeah. The possible projection for him was about $10 to $11 million per year, so a little less expensive than Bush, but worth keeping in mind given the connection.
Yeah, I think a positive regression bet here is a nice call here. Whereas with Devin Bush, it's well, we don't really know what's been going on here. Whereas Quincy Williams, it's pretty easy to figure out what happened with him in New York, I think. But yeah, good player. There's a stat out there that he was the first waiver claimed player to go on to be an All-Pro for that team. So
oh wow,
fun thing there for about Quincy Williams here. Next is a former Wisconsin Badger, Leo Chenal from the Kansas City Chiefs. 11 pressures, 3 sacks this past season, 31 tackles, 24 steps. It was actually a lot lower than I thought, just given the kind of reputation he has here. Mm-hmm. A lot of special team snaps, due for a breakout season. Kind of feel like the efficiency numbers back that up. Grades of 75 plus and missed tackle percentage have been very low for the last 3 years. 48 pressures in 4 years is kind of crazy. But he does play some edge in Kansas City, and they kind of always have that one off-ball linebacker who plays edge under Spags, and it's been Leo Chenal over the last few years. They do not have the money, it sounds like, to keep this kind of player. Just given, everything that they've been doing and potentially bringing back like Travis Kelce again and all of that stuff. Is there too much overlap with Troy Dye and Dan Henley? Maybe, but I do think that his run defense ability here and just his ability to just be a hammerhead, I think fills a different kind of role there from what those two guys can be, kind of more of your Denzel Perryman with also the pass rush stuff. So I'm interested, but I am also not interested. Just how I feel about like Marlo Wax and all those guys. But
Right.
This would be a very different kind of linebacker than what they have had, because like Dan can blitz and I think Marlo Wax can blitz, but like Leo Chenal can actually be an edge rusher on certain occasions. So would just be a very different kind of type of player, which can be exciting, but also, we don't really have a lot of track record in this kind of system with this kind of player.
Yeah, with the new, granted, only assistant outside linebackers coach, but there's some possibility there with moving some guys around like a Chenal or Chanel. I forget how I'm supposed to say it now. Is it Chanel or Chanel?
I think it's Chanel.
I thought it was that too, and then someone said it was actually Chanel. Anyway, like Chenal.
Okay.
Whatever. Leonardo. I think it's worth a look. I think he could be, as you said, maybe a better run defender. If he ends up settling and outperforming and plays better than Troy Dye, great. There's your LB2. If he's just a special teams guy, great. He's been doing that, so he's used to doing something like that. If he's just a pass rusher or a blitzer, I should say, great. He's been doing that. So if you get exactly what the Chiefs kind of got, all right, no problem. 2 years, $12 million, not the worst thing ever. I guess at that point you're probably playing over Troy Dye, but it's not the worst thing ever if he doesn't pan out, and it's okay if he's just kind of more of the same.
Yeah, I agree. Next on here, similar kind of style from a linebacker who rushes the passer, Caden Ellis, also from Atlanta.
Yeah, this is the dude who they just rushed. Like, he's listed as linebacker everywhere, and he just only lines up outside the offensive tackle. So had 30 pressures. So Chenal had, I guess it is Chenal. Chenal had 48 pressures in 4 years. This dude had 30 pressures last year, 4 sacks and 41 stops. He's just a stat racking up machine. And if Chris O'Leary wants to blitz and wants to send guys, or they want someone who can do something like this is your guy. 73 pressures the last 2 years. Among all NFL defenders and rushers, not just edge rushers, not just linebackers, among everyone, he's 12th in pass rush productivity and 9th in pass rush win rate among all these defenders in 2025, which is pretty good. So kind of same ditto issue as Chenal. Is he your true linebacker? I don't know. What do you even call this guy? I have no idea. Can Chris O'Leary and Elston and Roney and these guys have a ton of fun with this player? I think so. What is his role? No idea.
I wanted to see what Popper projected him as. 2 years, $19 million. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that is pretty good for a guy who just a pure send a kamikaze blitz at a guy, rush the passer sort of dude. Pretty good.
Yeah. If O'Leary is going to put a twist on the defense, I like getting a true like rusher linebacker, I think could be pretty fun, honestly. Because Jesse Minter did so much with the 3 edge rusher looks, but like, what if you have 2 edge rushers, a defensive tackle, and then this kind of linebacker allows you to play with a lot more coverage emphasis? It would be kind of fun to see what you could potentially do with this player, or like functional. Next on here is Elandon Roberts. So if you want to get a healthier version of Denzel Perryman, this is the guy. Anybody who has listened to Derek Klassen knows that he's from the Athletic Football Show. He loves linebacker play, and he loves Elandon Roberts because he's just like see ball, hit ball. There's a pulling guard in front of me. I'm just gonna like deplete him. Very similar kind of style to what Denzel Perryman has been for the Chargers. Obviously, Perryman has had his own issues with injuries and things like that. 91 combined tackles, 3 pressures, 34 run stops, which is 11th most this past season among all linebackers, 26 total pressures and 4 sacks in 24 and 23. The Steelers, in that connection, had him blitzing way more frequently than he did in Las Vegas and produced at a higher level because of it. Played it with Miami during Mike McDaniel's first season there. So there are several connections here. The Chargers, I do think they have a lot of smaller, coverage guys. I think Marlowe X can be more than that, but he is definitely undersized. Dayon's undersized. Troy Dye is undersized. So if you wanted kind of a bigger physical linebacker type, I know Perryman's undersized, but he's that kind of style. Roberts would definitely fit that role. There's connections there. So I think if the Chargers are going to go out and explore veteran free agents, I do think you either want some kind of, run defense specialist or pass rush specialist or coverage specialist to kind of just like minimize the role and let the younger guys can continue to develop. That's just my opinion. And Landon Roberts would allow them to do that.
Yeah, even if you feel like Marlowe Wax is and could be a future, I don't think you head into the season guessing that. So if you let Roberts cook and maybe it doesn't work out and you're ready for Matt Wax to take over by week 5 or 6, awesome. I think that'd be a solid stopgap for them if needed. I can't believe you said that he's younger than Denzel Perryman at 32 years old. Denzel Perryman will be 34 this year, which is making me feel as old as Woody the Cowboy apparently now.
Yeah. Yeah. I said this before, but when I was at training camp, me and Brett Coleman were talking to Denzel Perryman for a little bit, and Perryman wants to keep playing and he wants to finish his career with the Chargers. So we'll see if that ultimately happens. I don't think he's super high up on either of our lists there, but he wants to keep playing. He wants to keep being on the Chargers. So, we'll see what happens there.
Mm-hmm.
Next on here, another Steelers connection and Ravens connection, Malik Harrison.
Yep. Another, I think at this point we're in like Delshon Phillips territory. 7 pressures, 28 tackles, 13 stops last year. Was the special teams guy-ish last year for the Steelers. Was about 300 snaps a year with the Ravens. Former Ravens 3rd-round pick. Did play with the Steelers last year. Depth piece, but does have 43 career starts in, I believe, 6 years, if I'm not mistaken. So if you sign him, you're probably losing Delshon Phillips. Is he playing over Marlowe Wax? Probably. Do I want that? No. I'd rather keep Phillips and play Wax. But if they're looking for a familiar name, Harrison's one of them.
Yeah, he was the guy we highlighted ahead of the home Ravens game a couple of years ago, where it was like, oh, he's playing for Patrick Queen and he's horrible in coverage, and then they just like blitzed him the entire game.
Yeah. He was really good that game.
He was really good that game. So I don't know what happened in Pittsburgh. He didn't really play a lot, but good rusher, good run defender, definitely not a coverage guy. So, if you want a younger version of Denzel Perryman, Malik Harrison could be a potential fit there. Next one here, KJ Britt. This is definitely more of a special teams cut. Former Miami Dolphin this past season, 333 special team snaps, 10 tackles. He did have 35 total defensive tackles on 149 snaps, 72 total tackles in 2024 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So this is your potential Phillips replacement. I don't think there's like crazy production from a special teams standpoint. And he only has 1 real season with defensive snaps. So is a pretty similar situation to Delshon Phillips, where you're trying to find a special teams guy who is, faster, undersized, and can really, be a fit on the kickoff, on the new kickoff rule. So this is kind of really special teams only, and obviously played for Miami this last year.
Yep. Good shout out. Good connection. This is where we're at. That's how we're finishing things. KJ Britt. Everyone wanted us to talk about that guy.
Yeah. All right. There we go. All right. So I think it was 25 free agents that we talked about tonight. Any final thoughts about those 25 or general approach, Tyler?
I just know that I've sunk, 3 hours of prep time and an hour, 15 minutes of that showtime into them signing none of them. So I'm very excited to have created this for all of you, and none of it will happen.
Yeah, it'll be fun, but we got to do the homework. So
of course.
Yeah. All right. Before we get out of here, we'll take some super chats. Mr. Chow Chow getting us started and definitely into your offensive line themed as always. He wants to know if Zion, Vera Tucker, and Linderbaum is the dream offensive line, interior offensive line for the Chargers this offseason.
I'll be honest, guys. I don't understand the Vera Tucker discourse in terms of like, yeah, this guy has all pro potential. We should go get him. I get it. I'm not touching that, guys. There's no shot with all the injuries, with the projection that is out there, and anything could change, right? Maybe he is worth less than the projections, but for all the season-ending issues that he has, I'm good.
Yeah, there's a ton of injury history there at this point in time. I wonder where he was at with Poppers. Oh, he was 85th free agent overall. 1 year, $3 million contract projection from Popper, though.
Never
I'd be
mind. All in.
surprised.
No. Hey, $3 million, go for it, dude. Start the GoFundMe.
PFF had him a lot higher, I think. Yeah, he was their 37th ranked. Yeah, PFF is projecting a 4-year, $70 million contract, similar to Will Fry. So big disparity there between what Popper put together and what PFF put together. If he's cheap, I'm fine with it, but we talked about this on Tuesday. You're trying to mitigate risk as much as you can in free agency, and somebody who's dealt with, this many season-ending injuries, that'd be tough. So for a team like the Bengals, or a team that's like, just really desperate to find any kind of talent edge, he makes a lot of sense for them. For a team like the Chargers, who's trying to go from wild card team to Super Bowl contender, that amount of risk is just, it makes me uncomfortable, and I think it would make Joe Ortiz uncomfortable as well.
Yeah, I think so. Or he'll just sign him like Mekhi Becton.
True. Dre just said Bradley Bozeman. I don't know if there was a thing attached to this or not, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you for super chatting Bradley Bozeman. I'm assuming there wasn't news.
Nah, not that I know of. No.
Although, yeah, I don't know. Do you? He's gonna be cut, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would be stunned if he were not cut. Like he is the least possible Mike McDaniel center you could possibly find.
Yeah. I don't know.
Like, I've seen some people suggest like, oh, like keep him as the backup and for vibes. It's like, no. No.
Nah, man. You gotta, was it Poltergeist? As soon as they, cleared that house out, it just became a giant funnel and just got sucked into the ground or whatever, or disappeared. That's what you need. You can't just, move the tombstones, not the bodies. You gotta wrap it all up, man.
Yeah. Daddy Don't Pull Out says that apparently Bozeman has a better pass block rating than Linderbaum, according to PFF. Thoughts on that, and a new Spinosaurus series being discovered? What's that second? Is that a Pokemon?
It's a dinosaur. Have you seen I think it's the dinosaur from Jurassic Park 3 that kills the T-Rex. Anyway, thoughts on the new dinosaur being
Dre said no news, just a jump scare. Nice job.
My thoughts on a new species being discovered. Cool. Please stop bringing things to life. I love that we're in the era where you can start doing some Jurassic Park and Terminator things, and we've seen those movies, and people are still like, yeah, let's do the Jurassic Park and Terminator things. I'd prefer if we didn't, but it is what it is. On the numbers themselves, it's something to monitor. I think a lot of people, myself included, gun to my head, end of the season, hey, in terms of like Linderbaum and Bozeman, how many, what's the number? What's the gap in ranking between them? No shot, I would have said -1.
No, I think the thing with Linderbaum is, if the medical stuff is real, then that to me is the bigger concern than him playing poorly this year, where like the entire Ravens offense played poorly this year. And he was playing next to two really, 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 bad guards. He was playing next to two Mekhi Bectons basically as the starting center, trying to hold it all together. So it was just not a great situation. The entire offense kind of just flattened out. If the injury stuff is real, I'm concerned. I think whoever signs him can get him back to, what he was heading into 2023. And I think the Chargers, with Butch Berry and Mike McDaniel, and how much, more effective the pass rush plans are going to be, or pass protection plans are going to be, I think they'll have a really good chance to, pull the best out of him as the Ravens previously did. So I don't know. I've kind of gone back and forth of do I actually think the Chargers will pay this much money towards a center? And I don't know. I will have to wait and see. But I think sometimes I'm like, yeah, like they have to. And then other times I'm like, are they really going to pay $20 million to a center? I don't really know, man. I don't know. So a little conflicted there, but he's not anywhere close to the player that Bradley Bozeman is. I think he's
No, God, no.
yeah. If you look at some of his numbers on like ESPN, they're a lot higher. And PFF, despite having like a poor pass blocking efficiency rating, his pass blocking grade was really, really high. So it's very conflicting in that regard.
Yeah, if nothing else, if he gives you a significant upgrade as a run blocker, perfect. Yeah, so he's fourth in run blocking grade, and Bozeman was scroll. Oh, last. so I'll take it.
Yeah, I think he was second among all centers in run block rate on ESPN too. So
yeah,
he's a good player. There, it's the injury concerns that is my question.
Mm-hmm.
Quan got swag. Is that what that is? Says bolt up. Do y'all think we get Bradley Chubb? Maybe. If he's your edge 3 or 4, I could be down, but at that point I would just rather go draft somebody in the first round.
Yeah, I'll be completely honest, guys. I think it's Tart, Caldwell, Aboigbe, Mack, Owe, Thule, Jackson, Hart. Still, like I think it's just they're running it back, and then one of the first 2 picks is a defensive tackle.
Yeah,
that's just kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and that's a great approach to me.
Yeah,
I think you have had this group. Obviously, there have been some additions and changes, but you have had the core of this group together. And I think you want to keep it that way for a coordinator in his first year and just run it back, man, and sprinkle in some draft picks here and there and just run it back.
Yep.
And I think that'll be very exciting, but that's just me. Thomas Martinez says, what will the fan base say when Drew Tranquil gets cut? F that guy or bring him back.
I'm not even going to comment on any of this anymore. I'm over it. You can ask anybody else about the Drew Tranquil saga other than me.
Yeah. All right, guys. That is going to do it for us tonight. We are going to have a Saturday show this week. So plan on joining us Saturday morning. Bring some food questions, some pop culture questions, and everything like that. It'll be a fun show on Saturday. We always enjoy doing those. Are not able to do them a lot, but it's going to be pouring rain on Saturday here, so I can't go golfing. So here we are doing a Q&A show. As always, we appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to leave a like, rating, review. All that good stuff does genuinely help continue to grow our show. And we will see you next time. As always, bolt up.